Live on News 24, you're watching Sharri.
Good evening. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese punishes farmers and sporting shooters and misses the point that dangerous terrorism is the fundamental problem. Kelly Sloan calls this out.
To suggest a gun buyback is going to solve this for us, is going to stop another Bondi, it's absolute bullshit.
And she'll be on the show in a moment. Plus explosive claims from one of Australia's most respected former federal court judges about failures in the Anti-Semitism Royal Commission. Ronald Sackville joins me tonight for an exclusive television interview. And in major breaking news, the names of 5 Sydney Swans players assisting police with their investigation have been named. There are big players among them. This is huge news. I'll tell you who they are shortly. But first, let's talk about Prime Minister Anthony Albanese and Premier Chris Minns announcing their gun buyback scheme on the weekend. Minns said this could cost hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars and remove up to 274,000 guns from New South Wales. Now, first up, there's nothing wrong, of course, with removing guns from our streets, and fewer guns might slightly reduce the risk of a shooting. America and its lack of gun laws is a case in point. But guns are not the fundamental problem. The core issue is terrorism and radical Islamic extremism. Terrorists and Islamic extremists aren't exactly going to play ball with this scheme and happily hand in their weapons. It's the law-abiding citizens who will, and their gun ownership isn't the issue. Farmers and recreational hobby shooters simply aren't the problem. And I take exception with the Albanese government claiming that this gun buyback scheme is a fix for Bondi or would stop another terror attack from happening again. Here's what Home Affairs Minister Tony Burke said yesterday.
It allows us to deal with both the issue of how many firearms people have, but also being able to deal directly with the sort of firearms people have. Australians expect us all to act together and do everything we can to try to prevent anything like that horrific day in Bondi happening again, and this is part of that process.
Even without guns, the very same risk that allegedly caused 15 people to be killed, including a little girl, remains. Terrorists globally use knives, car rammings, explosive devices. And of course, the shooters at Bondi had improvised explosive devices with them that thankfully didn't detonate. Getting rid of guns doesn't solve the problem. If the Prime Minister genuinely wants to prevent another terror attack, he'd be looking at Islamic extremism, as Josh Frydenberg pointed out just 3 days after Bondi.
One of the leading journalists from the ABC say this has nothing to do with religion. That's not fact. We've heard from the agencies that there was an ISIS flag in the car, and we heard that these people have been training with Islamic extremists.
This is the key issue. Albanese's first response to Bondi, as you'll recall, was gun laws, not dealing with the terror threat. He still hasn't dealt with it. Yet it's this dangerous ideology that could cause another loss of life, and it has no place in our country. Former Prime Minister John Howard put it well just 2 days after the Bondi massacre.
And as for specific changes to gun laws, I don't want them to become a diversion, an excuse. And that's the fear I have, that, we're going to tighten these laws, make them even better. Well, I tell you, it'd be a good idea if you had to tighten your language over the last couple of years. And it sounded as though you were fair dinkum in stopping the spread of anti-Semitism.
Absolutely right. The late Lindsey Graham, the US Senator, put it even more bluntly at the time. And here he was speaking about the Albanese government's proposed gun laws in response to the Bondi terror attack.
And gun control? You think that's the answer to fighting ISIS? You're an idiot.
Yeah, exactly. But there are other flaws with this legislation as well. The laws reduce the number of guns any individual is allowed to hold to 4. But why 4? I mean, if the Bondi shooter had a licence for 4 guns instead of 6, they could still have carried out the attack. It's a completely arbitrary number. Let's be clear. This gun buyback scheme would not have stopped the Bondi attack. And it's a point New South Wales opposition leader Kelly Sloan made in no-nonsense language.
To suggest a gun buyback is going to solve this for us, is going to stop another Bondi, it's absolute bullshit. And I'm sorry for the language, it's entirely unlike me, but I am frustrated. And we need to make sure that we are addressing the real enemy.
And Kelly's standing by to join me in just a moment, but she makes it very clear who the real enemy is.
The real enemy is not a farmer, and it is not a law-abiding sporting shooter from Sydney's West. That is not the real enemy. We need to be absolutely clear-eyed about the real evil, about the real danger that we are dealing with in our community, and that is terrorism. Violent, extremist terrorism.
Now, the fact is, Sajid Akram should never have been issued gun licences in the first place. The government should be examining the police licensing department, as well as the failure of the AFP and Border Force to pass on intelligence to New South Wales Police and to ASIO that the Akrams had travelled to terror hotspots in the months and the years prior to Bondi. And then, as John Howard said, there's the failure to tackle anti-Semitism and hatred that was very clearly escalating on our streets. Intelligence sources have told me that Sajid Akram was motivated by the Israel-Hamas war. And this is where leadership plays a role. But unfortunately, it's the one thing our Prime Minister is lacking. Well, in major breaking news tonight, 5 Sydney Swans players have been named following an investigation into an alleged incident in Melbourne this morning. Channel 7 has just reported that Isaac Heaney, Chad Warner, Nick Blakey, Riley Bice and James Jordan are assisting police with their inquiries. It comes as officers investigate an alleged sexual assault at a hotel in East Melbourne. Senior reporter Matt Taylor has more.
Reports say 2 women were seen in the hotel lobby early on Monday morning, engaged in a tense exchange with club officials, including coach Dean Cox. It was left to the Sydney Swans boss to front the media, confirming an incident took place but revealing little more.
We're still piecing together exactly what's transpired here and have our own set of internal inquiries ongoing.
The CEO of the Sydney Swans refused to take questions from the media. He was asked if any arrests had been made, but said it would be inappropriate to comment on an ongoing investigation.
And if there are more developments this hour, I'll bring them to you live. All right, well, let's return now to the gun buyback scheme. And New South Wales opposition leader Kelly Sloan joins me live in studio. Kelly, welcome to the program.
Hi, Sharri.
Now, firstly, what's your response to the Prime Minister Anthony Albanese and Premier Chris Minns saying that this gun buyback scheme is needed in response to the Bondi attack?
Well, it's just not. And there is a reason that Chris Minns was the only Premier in the country to stand next to Albanese to announce that they would sign up to this, what I think is a flawed, half-baked proposal around a gun buyback scheme, which is a very expensive way to fix the wrong problem. And the wrong problem, or the problem that we should be addressing, is violent extremism, terrorism, Islamic terrorism, the organised criminals on our streets. They are the true evil that we are facing. But it is not law-abiding farmers. It is not law-abiding sporting shooters from our suburbs. We shouldn't be blaming them in a blanket approach that is underfunded and undercooked.
And I think you make the point well that, I mean, you said the government has to be kidding if they think that terrorists or organised criminals or bikies will be walking into a cop shop to hand in their weapons.
And this is the thing, like we're measuring success by the wrong metric, like the amount of guns that get handed in. It should be about who's handing them in. And I guarantee it is not going to be the crime bosses. It's not going to be the people that are shooting up our streets in southwestern Sydney and again in Melbourne today. And it is certainly not going to be would-be terrorists. It's the equivalent of Melbourne's machete bins. This just isn't going to work in the way they want it to. Now, I've got no problem with getting more guns off our streets, particularly in the cities where there's no reason for concrete cowboys in our cities to be having stashes of hundreds of weapons. That certainly shouldn't happen. But we actually need to address the flaws in this legislation in the first place, and that is what we're hearing now increasingly are unworkable caps.
So just to be clear, you won't be supporting this legislation?
So I need to be very clear that in the week after Bondi, this legislation was introduced into New South Wales Parliament. It was rushed law. I stood side by side with the Premier during this period. I do not doubt that he had the very best interests at heart with the community. But I did say at the time that the legislation he was attempting to pass was rushed, it was flawed, and there would be unintended consequences.
You did support it, though,
I
at the time.
supported it in the name of bipartisanship because I believe in the wake of the worst terrorism tragedy in our country, it is not the job of an opposition to merely oppose. You have to stand and support the Premier. But I also said, and I was very clear about this in the press release I issued the very next day, we need to be clear-eyed about the true cause of this, which is anti-Semitism and violent extremism. And where these laws are found to be flawed or where we can do better, we must do better. And since then, I've spent a lot of time with farmers, sporting shooters, people in various communities who are saying we haven't got the laws right. So we need to look at how we can improve the laws, keep our gun laws strong, but they must be workable and fair.
Right, so you have changed your position, and just to be clear, you won't be voting for these. You won't be supporting them when they go through the Parliament.
So the gun laws have passed through Parliament, but the problem is that the regulations haven't been imposed yet. So for rushing it through New South Wales Parliament on Christmas Eve,
that's right.
8 months later, we are still waiting for the full implementation of the scheme, and now we're hearing about a half-baked gun buyback that we know just isn't going to work. I had hoped to be working with the government on improving these laws. It is not good enough to be able to stand up and say these are the toughest gun laws in the country. And there is a reason. We need to be pragmatic and we need to listen as politicians. And if we didn't get it right or it could be improved, we must do better. And that's what I'm pledging today, and I've been doing for the last few months. I stood up at New South Wales Farmers Conference and said the same thing. I've been talking with stakeholders and saying...
So you're saying you got it wrong when you supported Chris Minns on this legislation?
I didn't get it wrong. I don't regret standing with the Premier in a moment of tragedy and saying we'll support you but we'll get it right later if there are unintended consequences. It's a really tough decision. I wanted the community to see us standing side by side. I was in a deep state of trauma. I'd been in the middle of that Bondi attack. I was a brand new opposition leader, had been in the job 3 weeks. I had a skeleton staff. We weren't in a position to prosecute an argument in Parliament, and I didn't want it to be messy for the public. But I'd made a pledge at the time that if we didn't get it right, we would consult, we would talk to farming communities, and that's exactly what I've done.
I just want to turn to a couple of other issues, and you've just been visiting farms in regional area in New England, I understand fifth-generation farmers who are dealing with massive transmission lines being forced through their property for renewable energy projects. How disruptive is this, and how big are these transmission lines?
Well, in the area of the New England res, the proposed new transmission line route, so this was changed on locals, the Walker to Bayswater line, involves every 400 metres or so transmission lines that are up to, as high as the Opera House every 400 metres through prime agricultural land. The other thing that we're seeing in that area is the economics just doesn't stack up. It's costing more than we ever thought it would cost. That will drive energy bills up, not just in that area, but in the city. And we're seeing some of the big industry players exiting the field. And in that case, we need to pivot, we need to change. And the Coalition has said that we will save those farms. We will make sure that if we're elected next year, the transmission lines do not go on that new route. We'll stick with existing infrastructure and we will put the energy elsewhere where it makes sense. So generation in the outback, generation closer to the cities. And that's our pledge.
In terms of the housing slump, I mean, this is something that everyone is noticing, an unintended consequence or, a catastrophic consequence as a result of Labor's changes to negative gearing and capital gains tax. How big of a problem is this in terms of house prices, mortgage applications collapsing?
I think that we're seeing on one hand, potentially a buyer's market for young first home buyers who are seeing housing prices drop. That should be the outcome. But it's not being balanced by supply. It's not being balanced by drops in rents. And then we are seeing a situation where many young people who've bought into their first homes are in negative equity. So that's not good either. The confidence is being evaporating. The market's getting spooked, and I have a feeling that we're in a situation that was entirely unpredicted and should have been predicted, because history doesn't always repeat, but it certainly rhymes. And Albanese should have seen this coming. He's unfortunately had a situation where we're not creating extra supply in the market, and it's young people who are suffering and whose rents are going up, and therefore they can't afford to buy the next home.
Just very quickly, I want to get your reaction to two big news stories. Bearing in mind there's a lot of legal issues around this. The prestigious Scots College is in your electorate, Kelly. What's your response to the scandal engulfing Scots at the moment?
I think it's a deeply shocking allegation that has been made, and it's probably rocked the whole community. I know that this is a police matter. These are children, both the alleged victim and perpetrators. And I just would say, I think it's really important for parents to be having conversations. We can talk about the school, we can talk about community leaders, but we often forget to talk about parental responsibility and the importance of having those chats with young people today, particularly today, in this day and age where it is so easy for young people to access online pornography. They're seeing disturbing images. It's a fast-paced world. None of that necessarily relating to the case, because that's all before the courts. But I think it's an important time to sit down with your kids, to be good role models at home, and to have these conversations that are incredibly difficult. But difficult conversations now sometimes can prevent even tougher conversations later.
Absolutely.
For our girls and our boys.
Absolutely. And then disappointing news about your team as well, the Sydney Swans.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we expect our sporting stars to be good role models, and we hold them to a higher standard but they shouldn't be holding themselves to a lower standard. So, I mean, this is shocking news. It's a club that has had such a high standard and such a good standing in the community. So when you hear this news, it really floors people.
And of course, still allegations that police are investigating. Kelly, thank you very much. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Sharri.
Thanks. Well, there was a brilliant article by journalist James Dowling in The Australian today, which raised questions over the Royal Commission into anti-Semitism and how effective it will be. It outlined its limitations, its flaws and its failures. And it quoted the prominent former Federal Court judge, Ronald Sackville. He has quite some experience in this space, having chaired the Disability Royal Commission. He also personally worked alongside Commissioner Virginia Bell on the New South Wales Court of Appeal. I'm pleased to say the Honourable Ronald Sackville sat down with me for an exclusive television interview earlier today. Ronald, thank you so much for your time.
That's a pleasure.
First, to start with, how do you assess the Royal Commission is going?
There are many things that you've got to take into account. I think that the Royal Commission has done some really very good work, particularly in allowing Jewish Australians to recount their experiences of anti-Semitism in a supportive environment at open hearings, and sometimes with due protection for their privacy by allowing people to give evidence anonymously. That, I think, is really very important. It's been important because it's cathartic for the grieving and traumatised Jewish community, and it's important in order to inform the broader Australian community of the experiences of Jewish Australia. So that part of it has been, I think, very well done, as has the Royal Commission's actions in producing about 20,000 submissions, which is a major achievement, and many of those are very, very important. They're compelling accounts of the experiences of Jewish people. Many examine the policy issues in great detail. So there are some really good aspects of the Royal Commission. My own view, and it has been from the beginning, that in order to cover the most of the matters in the terms of reference, thoroughly and in detail, you would need more than 1 year, or 11 months really. And I think that what has happened is that the Royal Commission has had to tailor its hearings and its inquiries to the deadline of the 14th of December 2026, and that has meant that certain things that might have been examined in more detail have not been. And I particularly think that there could have been more done with more time to hold accountable people who have been responsible for acts of egregious anti-Semitism.
Would you encourage Commissioner Virginia Bell to ask for an extension of time? It is within her powers and remit to do that.
It's always possible for a Royal Commissioner to seek an extension of time. The Disability Royal Commission, which I chaired, was originally set up for 3 years, and we requested an extension for a variety of compelling reasons, and eventually we had 4.5 years. I think it's, in a sense, a moot question. I think Commissioner Bell has made it quite clear that she is not going to seek an extension, and that's a decision that it's open to her to make, of course, but it does have consequences for what can be covered by the Commission.
If it were you doing it, you would seek an extension? More than 11 months?
If it were me doing it, all sorts of things might have happened, but if I were to put forward an application for an extension, it would have been much earlier than right now.
Well, given your in-depth experience both as a federal court judge and as the former chair of the Disability Royal Commission, what are your key concerns with how this Royal Commission into anti-Semitism is unfolding?
Well, the major concerns I have, as indicated, is that I think that part of the function of a Royal Commission of this kind is to investigate in some detail the conduct of people who've engaged in anti-Semitic acts. For example, in social media. We all know that social media can be a cesspool, and for people who are on social media within the Jewish community, particularly writers and creative people, they've been subjected to relentless anti-Semitic abuse. I think it would have been a very good thing for the Commission to use its powers of compulsion, at least to bring forward some of those who've engaged in these acts and hold them accountable, not just for the purpose of shaming them, but in order to vindicate the experiences of Jewish people, to show that people can be held accountable for their actions, and to discourage people in the future for doing that sort of thing. It's not only the criminal law that can be used to discourage people from hateful acts. There are other ways in which that can be done.
Yeah, that's a really important point. Do you think the Opera House rally, I mean, that rally on October 9 was really the first public display of anti-Semitism after the October 7 attacks, and it came as a shock to so many people. It was bewildering to so many. Yet the Commission only devoted 5 hours of time to that rally. Do you think there should be, or should have been, a more thorough examination of the actors involved and the response from authorities?
In an ideal world, yes, I would have liked to have seen a much more thorough investigation, probing a number of questions. We know what the position of the Palestinian groups that were given leave to Mr. Ossep was, or is. They say that the loathsome anti-Semitic acts were committed by people who joined the protest after the town hall and after the protest had moved to the Opera House, and that the organisers did their best to stop that, or at least curtail it. But we don't know what actually happened without a forensic examination, which would require the Commission to use its powers of compulsion to make some findings about what actually occurred. Judging from Counsel Assisting's opening address at that hearing on the 4th of August, it seems highly unlikely that any findings about that will be made. So in a sense, that is an opportunity lost. I can understand the reasons for the Commission taking that course, but my view is that there was an opportunity to take it further, and that opportunity was lost.
Just on that cross-examination of Jewish leader David Ossep that you refer to by the lawyers acting for pro-Palestinian activist groups, and not only cross-examining him, but cross-examining him about events in the Middle East unrelated to Australia, did that concern you to see that happen?
There are a number of issues that arise. It's important to note that Commissioner Bell was right to say that counsel for those groups had not attempted to hijack the hearing. They'd done what they were entitled to do, that is, to seek leave to appear at the hearing on behalf of those organisations and to leave to cross-examine. They're two different things. Leave to appear at a hearing does not carry with it automatically the right to cross-examine a witness. That's a separate matter. And the argument that Commissioner Bell used was that this was necessary in order to afford procedural fairness to those groups. I don't want to go into detail about that at the moment, but my own view is that to the extent that procedural fairness was required, there are ways in which that could have been satisfied quite readily without giving leave to cross-examine Mr Ossip, bearing in mind that most of the things he was cross-examined about he did not know, and perfectly understandably did not know.
And he made that very clear. He said, this is outside of my knowledge, this is outside of my ability to answer those questions, but the Commissioner overruled him.
Well, the Commissioner didn't overrule him. The Commissioner said in response to an objection made by counsel who appeared for the Jewish organisations that she thought that some of this questioning was permissible. Ultimately, she brought a halt to it when the senior counsel for the Australian-Palestinian network wanted to continue with the cross-examination on the background to what she said were the demonstrations and what Israel's conduct over many years, which the objection implicitly at least said was outside the terms of reference of the Royal Commission.
She let it run for an hour. And David Ossip did, in his first and second answer, raise that he didn't think it was appropriate for him to answer the questions. And she said, if it falls outside the terms of reference, I will intervene.
Yeah, well, that's the role of it. The role of a commissioner is to control the proceedings, make rulings. And, of course, Commissioner Bell was entitled to make those rulings, just as anybody who is critical of what happened is entitled to criticise because it's a public hearing and a Royal Commission is not immune from criticism.
Of course. Just outside of the technical rules of the terms of reference and whether or not it abided by them, I mean, the perception broadly in the Jewish community was it played into this narrative that Jewish Australians can be held responsible for the actions of the Israeli government in Gaza.
I think one of the most obvious manifestations of anti-Semitism is precisely that. It's reflected in the notion you hear so often expressed: Zionists are supporters of racism, Zionists are supporters of genocide. I leave to one side the question of whether Israel has in fact committed genocide. Holding a group of Jewish Australians, that is, Jewish Australians who regard themselves as Zionists, they hold a range of opinions, and to hold every one of them responsible for the actions of Israel, which in some respects are very much to be condemned, that is a perfect example of racism and an example of anti-Semitism.
There seems to be this sense that the Commission has tread lightly. Could the Commission have used its coercive powers in a more effective way?
Well, it certainly could have used its coercive powers much more often and much more deeply. It chose not to, and that was a judgment, of course, that is open to the Royal Commission.
What about the fact the Royal Commission hasn't called Josh Frydenberg, who is the highest ranking Jewish Australian to ever serve in Parliament?
That is a decision, obviously, for the Commission, and there could be a number of reasons for it. One that has been put to me from within the organised Jewish community is that Josh really wouldn't be able to add terribly much to what has already been said. It's obviously had an impact within the Jewish community, and anything that causes the standing of the Royal Commission to be diminished at all within the Jewish community, I think would be better avoided. But again, the Royal Commission has to make these kinds of decisions, bearing in mind that not everybody can be called to give evidence, and there are a large number of issues that have been examined and still remain to be examined.
And they have to live with the consequences. Just final couple of questions. Do you think there has been a loss of confidence in this Royal Commission from the Jewish community?
I can't answer that definitively.
Your sense of it?
My sense of it within the people that I'm aware of within the Jewish community is that for some people, the hearing on the 4th of August in particular was disappointing. And for those people, there may have been a diminution in their confidence in the Commission. I think that's a pity. But it's important to bear in mind that the Commission still has, we're now towards the end of August, so we've got another 4 months more or less before the report is due. There are more hearings. There's an opportunity for that confidence, to the extent it's been diminished, to be restored. So I'm not sure that it is a permanent difficulty, but there's no doubt that within some sections of the Jewish community there has been a diminution in confidence.
Yeah, I'd certainly say there has been. Is this a lost opportunity, in a sense, to have a powerful Royal Commission into anti-Semitism and not give it the full time that it needs?
I don't think you can say at this stage that it's a lost opportunity. I think that there's much to unfold as yet. There are some criticisms that I think can be made of particular decisions that have been made within the Commission, but I think it would be premature to say that it's a lost opportunity. We live in a world where perfection is very rarely achieved, save on your new show.
Thank you so much for your time.
That's a pleasure.
And that was the former Federal Court Judge Ronald Sackville. Well, still to come, the tragic rise and fall of Cambridge University professor Jason Arde. And Pauline Hanson says she doesn't like the Mardi Gras, and she's still refusing to look up the name of the Indonesian president. Ray Hadley will tell us what he thinks after the break. Welcome back, and joining us at the desk, as always on a Monday, radio legend Ray Hadley, who's been making the news today again, but I can't ask you about it because it's before the courts.
Sub judice, they call. Nice to be with you.
Good to see you again. All right, well, let's have a look at this fantastic interview that Andrew Clennell did with Pauline Hanson yesterday, and she made a few controversial comments, OK? Here's the first thing she had to say about the Mardi Gras.
Do I like the gay Mardi Gras? No, and I'll tell you that now. No, I still don't like the gay Mardi Gras, but that's my opinion.
He also asked her, Ray, about comments she'd made previously, which I don't even really want to repeat, where she said, you know, very offensive things about, and he played her the comments back to her, very offensive things about, you know, people who are homosexual, and she didn't distance herself from them. I would have liked her to say, I am horrified by those past comments. I don't believe them anymore, but she didn't say that.
We're probably talking about comments she made 30 years ago, and I would hope that
something like that.
Yeah, she's much more enlightened now. But look...
But say that then. Well, she didn't say it.
Look, Pauline is on a roll, OK? She shoots from the hip. Sometimes she doesn't think about what she's saying, and sometimes she does. She's a provocateur. She says things that she knows will get a reaction. I'm tipping that there are plenty of people who've swung across to her who have similar views about a whole range of things. Whether they're correct or not, and whether they're views that I'd hold, I'd be horrified. But they're her views, and what she's done is identified herself as an alternative to the normal politician. And the other thing I know that we were talking about earlier is about her not knowing the name of the Japanese Prime Minister.
And the Indonesian President.
Well, honestly, how many people watching here tonight or in the electorate know the name of the Indonesian Prime Minister?
She's not running to be Prime Minister.
But she's not going to be Prime Minister, Sharri.
You don't know. A lot of people think she will be Prime Minister.
She's in the upper house. She's not going to be the Prime Minister.
She keeps saying, you know, there's nothing preventing her from the upper house being Prime Minister. A lot of people want her to be PM.
Well, the Constitution might stop her there, but the simple fact of the matter is that she is not one who is, you know, big on detail. And look, you had Kelly Sloan on earlier. When she was first elevated to Leader of the Opposition, they did a vox pop, I think, on what was known as Sky News back then. No one knew who she was. They know who she is now. But if you ask someone, who's the opposition leader in Victoria? Victorians, obviously. Who's the opposition leader in New South Wales? Who's the Premier in Victoria? Who's the opposition leader in Queensland? You see, I don't think it matters to people that she doesn't know the name of these prominent politicians.
I think people just think the media's bullying her, but I actually want to play that.
She might struggle a bit with pronunciations as well, which I do from time to time.
Struggle with pronunciations. But this is actually this is fascinating for more reasons than the fact that she didn't just know the answer. Because here's what happened. Chris Kenny in his documentary interview, said to her, do you know the name of the Indonesian president or the Japanese prime minister? She didn't. Then she went on Chris Kenny's show a couple of weeks later. She brought it up and he said to her, well, can you name the Indonesian president now? No, she couldn't.
She doesn't care.
And then Clennell asked her yesterday, and let's have a look. Here's what she told Clennell.
I still haven't looked up who the Prime Minister of Indonesia is because I don't need to know. I'm not the Foreign Minister. I'm not the Prime Minister.
So she's refusing to look it up. And by the way, Ray,
she should have had a guess and said
Subianto.
the most famous Indonesian president is Bang Bang Yudhoyono. Now, there's a name you'd never forget.
So why is she refusing to look
she's
it up?
not
Just look it up.
She's not a conventional politician and she probably struggles to say Subianto. I don't know. But it doesn't matter. And those protests by the young people last week won't make any difference to the polls either. She's on a roll and she knows she's on a roll. And as she said, I'm not the Prime Minister. And yes, she's been warned 3 times. She was going to be asked by Andrew. She was going to be asked by other people about who it was. And she doesn't care. She said, and her point would be most of the people who are swinging towards her, they don't know who it is either. And they don't care who it is.
Yeah. Again, they're not running.
I'm not convincing you, am I?
No, well, she wants to be the Prime Minister. I mean, she needs to know who the President of Indonesia is.
Yeah, I want to be a billionaire too, but I'm not going to be one.
All right, well, maybe you could be. I mean, maybe if she learned a bit more detail, she could be. All right, let's turn to this student visa topic. So this is quite a big issue.
And she's onto this. I mean, she doesn't know whether she's talking about net or permanent migration. But look, the student visa is a big story. It's called a 485. And once these people have graduated, they get this temporary graduation visa. And currently in this country, there are 271,000 people on these extended visas. Now, most people watching would think, oh, they've been to a really prominent university. No, it's only 2 years of study. It's a diploma course, perhaps, as well as being a university course, a 2-year diploma course. They could be learning how to mow lawns or do a whole range of things, you know. So there are 271,000 of those that have been extended by the Labor Party for people to stay here. Not permanently, but an extension. Yeah. And they'll fight to stay here. Of the 271,000, 74,000 of those visas have been issued to family members, either the children or the spouse of the person who holds the visa. So all of a sudden, a third of the people here on study visas are not studying. And that's a rort, and that's something that Tony Burke should change immediately.
I didn't actually know that before this report, that there are so many people here off the back of a student visa that their whole family can come.
Yeah, and that doesn't include all the other people on student visas. These are people granted another visa when they've finished a minimum 2-year course at some sort of institution. It could be a private institution. It could be some college that's privately run and they've done 2 years there. You don't know what they've graduated with, a diploma in anything, but they then apply for the 485 visa. 271,000 get it. Of that, 74,000 are not actually students.
It's such a mess, the migration system.
The whole thing's just ridiculous.
It needs a big clean-up. Now, Ray, Mellongate occupied the entire of last week. Now, since then, and I'm so glad we're not, getting completely back into this, but the podcaster, Nikki Osborne, has come out and said, that she DM'd the PM. She slid into his DMs and that he was already following her.
Can you just stop there? What's a DM?
Oh, come on.
No, look, I'm not savvy like you.
Really?
I'm a lot older than you.
Direct message. If you direct...
Well, all the people out there watching, they now know what it is.
Direct message. Do you have a Twitter or an Instagram?
No, I'm not on any of that. You know how many friends I've got on Instagram? 12. My children and their spouses and some of my grandchildren. That's it. I'm not an Insta
But
hit.
You do go viral. I mean, your comments attacking the Prime Minister on the Monday after the terror attack... 24 hours after the terror attack down at the Damascus site, you were on air with me and everyone was around videoing you and they went viral because you said he should resign.
Well, I still think he should resign over a whole range of other matters apart from that.
Yeah.
But look, simply in relation to this, okay, and you've got to be my age or a bit older to know Benny Hill. Now, Benny Hill was this comedian in Great Britain and he really played on the fact that he had rather large-breasted ladies on his program. And this is
it's
1960s, 1970s. But if you do what the Prime Minister did, and I have to do it, and say, no, she didn't give me 1 melon, she gave me 2 melons, double entendre means you're reflecting on the lady's breasts. And he can't keep denying it. And Tanya Plibersek, as I said today in the Daily Telegraph video, you're better than this. You know you shouldn't defend a man who did what he did. And for him to say, oh, look, I use my hands all the time. I mean, what's next? Some other gesticulation which is just as offensive as that one for other people. I mean, look, all he has to do, he apologised to Kylie. He should say, look, it was a dumb thing to do on the podcast in the first place. I shouldn't have done it. I'm a melon head, if you'll pardon the pun. And I apologise for anyone that mistook my gesticulations to indicate I was talking about the Japanese Prime Minister, whatever her name may be, breasts. Their end of the story.
Sanai Takaichi. Ray?
Oh, Pauline, are you watching?
I'm just showing off. All right. Thank you. See you next Monday.
See you later. Bye-bye.
All right, still to come is the left's obsession with diversity to blame for the Jason Arde tragedy, and how pro-China Paul Keating advised Albanese on managing relationships with China and the United States. That's next. Well, a new book has claimed that Prime Minister Anthony Albanese turned to former PM Paul Keating for advice on managing Australia's relationships with both the United States and China. Now, Keating is famously pro-China, yet Politico reports that, according to his biographer, James Curran, he advised Albanese for several hours ahead of Albanese's meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping, even passing him talking points to keep in his pocket. And joining me now, former Labor MP Michael Danby and former Labor State Secretary Cameron Milner. It's a whole Labor panel tonight, isn't it? Michael, should Albanese have been seeking advice from Paul Keating on China?
No. And this is in the context of Penny Wong finally acting on Alex Joski's brilliant picking flowers, making honey about the infiltration of Australian universities by Chinese military universities. Keating has good advice to give on economic reform. I wish he'd been giving that to Albo. They could certainly have used it. But on China, he's seriously, as Gary Gray used to describe him, Captain Wacky. And it's like he listens to podcasters that he invites to the lodge directly. He listens to Keating on this. I wish he'd listen even to Penny Wong, who seems to have a more sound view of Beijing these days.
Cameron, you know, apparently in this report, apparently there was even advice on how to use the memo. I mean, to me, that sounded a bit hard to believe.
Well, the memo would have come from Beijing to Paul and then to Albo. I mean, it would have been written in China. I mean, the problem for Keating on this issue is he's anti-AUKUS and he's pro-China. He's an avowed Sinophile, and that's our problem. And he's completely biased on this topic. So he doesn't bring impartial advice, doesn't bring national interest. He brings his own self-interest and China's interest to the table. And that's the biggest problem with this secret advice that was given at Kirribilli behind the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet's back.
Yeah, and the PM has yet to respond to this. Perhaps someone will ask him about it at a press conference this week. Now, former Treasury boss Martin...
He'll lie again.
Well, let's see. Let's see. I mean, this is in a book by Keating's biographer, James Curran, according to the Political report.
True.
So we'll see. From another former senior figure, the former Treasury boss Martin Parkinson, he's slamming the government over its spending levels. He's saying that future generations will bear the cost of Labor's constant budget deficits. Here's what he told the Fin Review. He said, if we take the budget papers as correct, it takes a decade to get back to headline surplus. And even then we get a surplus in part because of an assumption on terminating expiring programs. He says, we are consuming today and our children are going to pay for it with their tax burden. Michael, damning remarks.
This is a man who worked for Labor governments in the past. He worked for other governments too, but he's not a sort of an anti-Labor economic conservative. He certainly is giving the government good advice. I wish Paul Keating in Albo's ear about cutting budget deficits, cutting back on the crazy schemes of green hydrogen that our mad Minister for Windmills, Blackout Bowen, is pushing all the time. There are different ways of handling the economy than the way that Albo and his poor treasurer, his Sancho Pancha, is handling it. And Parkinson is right.
I mean, Parkinson was, if memory serves me correct, he was pretty close to former PM Kevin Rudd. I mean, if he's coming out publicly criticising the spending, this shows just how bad it is, doesn't it, Cameron?
Oh, it does. And to Michael's point before, I mean, Martin Parkinson is a Labor guy who's advised Prime Minister Gillard and Rudd, was a trusted confidant in terms of Treasury and also Prime Minister and Cabinet as well. So he is a Labor guy sounding the alarm bells on this reckless spending. Remember when Kevin Rudd said, we've got to stop this reckless spending? Yeah. Well, that was what he meant. And that's what Martin Parkinson said today as well. We are spending tomorrow's dollars, our children's dollars, on failed schemes today. And that's a huge problem. And I'm so glad someone of Martin Parkinson's stature has finally called time on this Labor budget and time on this reckless spending.
Indeed. I want to turn to this terrible story from the UK. Cambridge academic Jason Arday. Now, you'll recall we've been talking about it on and off on the show for the past couple of weeks. He resigned over allegations of plagiarism and academic fraud. Well, he's now been found dead, aged 41. Now, he became a star candidate. This was off the back of the diversity push. And now there are major questions about whether Cambridge University did its due diligence before they, put him on a pedestal, and also whether they took his vulnerability seriously when all of these reports started emerging in the media. Michael, what do you think?
Sharri, he seemed a bright guy from the interviews I've seen too, but I really shivered when I saw the patronising way the head of his department handled him. The woman who's on screen now, it was so cruel to treat him in this patronising kind of way, giving him positions that he clearly wasn't academically qualified for, not even reading his CV that he'd done 30 marathons and other similar nonsense. It's a terrible end for a bright young black man, and it's partially the DEI idiots at Cambridge's fault.
I mean, there's been, there have been questions over the media coverage, of course, Cameron, because, after these revelations, it ultimately did lead to his passing. But there's also responsibility from the university here, of course. I mean, if the university leadership had recognised the questions that journalists were asking, I mean, it could have prevented such a tragedy.
Well, that's right. And I was actually in the UK when a lot of these stories were breaking only a couple of weeks ago as well, in the news over there. And I think the news was asking the right sorts of questions because Cambridge University has a duty of care. They have a duty of care to this young man. And they ticked a box, they ticked their diversity box, they put him out in front and centre and promoted him as something great that the university had found without doing the due diligence themselves or having a care for his mental health and circumstances. Certainly as those stories and questions started to break, they put him out front and centre. And that's the worst possible thing they could have done. And it's an absolute tragedy to have lost someone who might have been flawed, but was truly talented. And the university should take full responsibility for what's happened.
I just want to end with this idea that Pauline Hanson has come out with on superannuation. Now, she's saying the housing crisis is so bad that people should be able to access their super to pay their mortgage. Have a look.
A lot of Australians are doing it tough now and struggling to pay off their mortgages. In some ways, I feel that you should give them their money now and let them help them with the cost of living. It is their money.
Well, Treasurer Jim Chalmers has responded to this.
Labor built Australia's superannuation system and we will defend it forever from the Liberals, Nationals and One Nation who want to destroy it. If they win the next election, it will be the end of compulsory super as we know it, and Australian workers will be worse off as a consequence.
Yeah, so another scare campaign coming there. But Michael, if the problem is not superannuation, right? The problem is that there's a housing crunch because of the budget and the economy. So doesn't that need to be addressed instead of allowing people to dip into their retirement savings?
I understand you can anyhow, Sharri, if it's an emergency, but it's the housing crisis that's the problem. All of these young people who've lost their equity in their home who only had 5% to start out with. But the problem is, for too long, this government has had unsustainably high levels of immigration of people in all the categories you were talking about in a previous segment who we didn't even know were coming in. And that's the cause of the housing shortage. We've got too many people and not enough houses being built. That's the real issue. You're right.
What do you think, Cameron?
I think One Nation's onto a political winner here because trade union super, which is basically what industry super is now, it's trade union super full of hacks from the Labor Party, failed former treasurers, fronting CBUS and stuff like that. No, I mean it's a huge problem. Super doesn't have any connection. Super doesn't have any connection to the people it takes money from every single week now. And if people look at their pay pack and say, I could have 12.5% more dollars in my pocket than giving it to a super fund for 45 years, then they're on a winner. So that's what the problem is. And the problem for industry super is they'll sit back and say, the Labor Party are defending us without realising the only reason why they are there is both sides of politics supported compulsory superannuation. And if only Labor's supporting it and the Greens, then industry super, as I say, trade union super, is in for a hell of a problem because they haven't done enough to connect to their members.
All right, got to go. Michael Danby, Cameron Milner, great to see you both. And after the break, the latest on the allegations rocking a Sydney private school. That's next. Now, just before we go, let's get the latest in the Scots College scandal because there was a lot that happened on the weekend. Now, 3 students from the prestigious college were charged last week over the alleged sexual assault of a teenage girl in an alleyway on July 22. But now 5 boys aged between 13 and 17 have been arrested for allegedly throwing eggs at the home of one of the students accused of sexual assault. Police were called to a Dover Heights home on Saturday to find the boys, one allegedly armed with a knife, allegedly egging the house. 4 of the boys have been released without charge and one 17-year-old has been charged with breach of bail and custody of a knife in public, and he's due to appear before a children's court on Monday. The Scots College principal, Dr. Ian Lambert, has emailed parents about the incident. He said he's aware of concerning online commentary within the wider community and he's asked that young people do not post threats, organise action or otherwise involve themselves. Very sad story. I'll see you tomorrow at 8 o'clock. That's it from me. Up next, Paul Murray.